Joined by the Housing and Community Secretary, Robert Jenrick. Thank you very much for being on the programme. I'm not sure if you managed to hear everything that Jonathan Reynolds was saying there. He says that there are murky allegations about this allocation of funding from a scheme run by your department. The Towns Fund dishing out money to 101 deprived areas, but Newark, in your constituency, was chosen even though it ranked as the 270th most deprived area in the country. What's going on?
Well, Sophie, we're in the middle of a national crisis, and all the Labour Party could do is make up political point-scoring stories which are completely baseless. My department's officials have been very clear that we chose the towns for our £3.6 billion Towns Fund on a robust and fair methodology that's there for everybody to see. We're not going to apologise for investing in communities that were left behind and undervalued by the Labour Party for many, many years. Many of those were won by the Conservative Party at the last general election, but that's a reflection on the Labour Party, not upon the methodology by which we chose those towns. We're going to keep on supporting those communities. That's absolutely at the heart of the mission of this government.
You're talking about the methodology, but you can understand why it does seem a little bit strange. You know, these towns were chosen just before the election. 61 of the towns selected by you to receive money were Conservative targets, even though other areas were ranked as more deprived by civil servants. So was taxpayers' money used to try and win votes?
No, that's not. With respect, Sophie, that's not actually correct. The methodology was created long before the general election. It actually was created by the previous administration before Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. We chose the top 40 most deprived communities
Conservative
in the whole
target
country,
seats.
and well, actually, many of them were not Conservative target seats. The fact that many of those
61 were won by the Conservatives at the election.
Well, as I say, I think that's
lost
more
by
reflection on what happens to the Labour Party than it is on the Conservative Party's policies. But we had a fair and robust methodology. It was decided by ministers and by civil servants, and it's been set out at great length by the department. I think the Labour Party here is really trying to distract from the fact that they don't like us to be making good on our promise to support these communities, to give them the investment that they need in infrastructure, in skills, in technology and in culture. And that investment, designed long before the pandemic, is even more important today because we want to help these communities to grow and to recover from the very challenging economic circumstances that many of them are facing at the moment.
So just to be crystal clear, did you select Newark in your constituency to receive the money? And if you didn't, who did?
No, Sophie, we've been extremely clear. Ministers don't make decisions about their own constituencies. That's a long-standing position. They're done by other ministers in the department.
Who chose it then?
By another minister in the department, Sophie.
OK. Thank you for that. Just finally on that, are you going to go to Parliament to explain yourself as Labour want?
We're not going to get involved in party political point scoring. I'm afraid this is just a distraction tactic by the Labour Party. We've answered all the questions and happy to answer any more that might arise, but there really is nothing to see here.
OK, now I'm keen to talk to you about COVID, about the government's response to coronavirus. Obviously, so many of our viewers will be very nervous ahead of what we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister tomorrow. There's been an awful lot of briefing about a new three-tier system where if you're on the highest tier, the highest number of infections, then you'll be under stricter restrictions than elsewhere. What should we expect to hear tomorrow?
Well, the Prime Minister is going to be making an announcement tomorrow, so I don't want to preempt what he intends to say. But in addition to the basic, simple rules that apply to the whole country, we're designing a framework for those places for where the virus is very strong. And there will be some rules which apply consistently, but then also we're in very productive conversations with local leaders, local directors of public health, to ask them if there are any further measures that they would support which will help to control the virus in their local communities. So we want the strongest possible working relationship now between central government and local government, because the virus, although it's spreading concerningly across the whole of the UK, it is very concentrated in some places, and so it's right that we take action in those communities and design the measures in conjunction with people who know those places best.
You say about the importance of rules being applied consistently. So on what basis will areas move between different levels? Will it be based on case numbers, the R rate, hospital admissions? Will there be a publicly available system?
Well, I think you'll have to wait to see what the Prime Minister says on that regard. But we've taken into account historically a range of different factors. The number of cases per 100,000 is significant, but there are also other important factors which we can use as well, including hospitalisations and the nature of those cases, whether they are across the whole of the community or whether they're more contained in particular settings.
And what exactly should people expect if they are in the highest tier? Could there be a ban on mixing with other households even outside?
Well, I can't say that today because you'll have to wait for tomorrow. What we have said is that accompanying those measures will be a very comprehensive package of support. The Chancellor has already set out the support for people where business is asked to close as a result of these additional measures, that the government will step in and pay 2/3 of their wages. He's also been clear that those businesses will be able to apply for grants of up to £3,000 to help them cover their rent and other expenses, in addition to the measures that he's already put in place, like the VAT cut for hospitality, the business rates holiday for retail and hospitality. And in addition,
what businesses should be expecting to be ordered to close? Pubs? Restaurants?
Well, I'm not going to say that, Sophie, because you'll have to wait for tomorrow. It wouldn't be right for me to announce on the programme what the Prime Minister will say to Parliament tomorrow. You say it's, with respect, you say it wouldn't be right for you to say that, but we've been given briefings for a long time in the newspapers. Every time you pick up the press, you can see more leaks. Local leaders are saying that they're finding out what's going on by reading these leaks. I mean, we're not stupid. They're obviously coming from government. Tens of millions of people will be feeling that, sick fear of uncertainty, not sure what's coming. You've got an opportunity here to give people the clarity that they need, that businesses need, and you're just ducking the questions. No, that's not right. The Prime Minister is going to set out the way forward in the House of Commons. That is the right way to proceed. The Chancellor has already set out very clearly the very strong financial support that we're putting in place. I appreciate that people working in certain sectors and business owners will be feeling very concerned, but he's set out, I think, a fair and generous package to help to support them. And we've spent the weekend working with those local leaders. It was not correct what you heard from Jonathan Reynolds, that there hasn't been good communication. I've spent the whole weekend talking to leaders from Merseyside, from Greater Manchester, from other parts of the country. We're trying to work very closely with mayors, with council leaders and chief executives to design these measures with them. That does take time. That's because we want to have good communication between national and local government before we announce how we're going to take this forwards.
You've been talking about the measures put in place by the Chancellor, the announcement that the government will step in to pay 2/3 of people's wages if businesses are ordered to close. Will there be any further financial support for areas under these postcode lockdowns?
Well, I think that is a very significant intervention. It's building on the winter economy plan that the Chancellor had set out 2 weeks ago that was very well received. It was supported by the TUC and the CBI. As you say, it ensures that those workers in businesses that are asked to close by law are then able to receive 2/3 of their unearned wages. We're also providing those business grants to the small and medium-sized businesses that will need them. This comes on top of the other measures. Many of those workers will have been on the furlough scheme beforehand. And the latest measures that we're introducing do compare favourably internationally. It's broadly the same as what's happening in France and Spain. It's more generous than what's happening in Italy and Germany. So I think this is
specifically about whether there'll be any more financial support, or is that it?
Well, we can't do everything. We are in a deep recession. The national debt is rising. I think most reasonable people would see that the Chancellor has put in place an unprecedented package of support. This is a good safety net for those individuals, but we understand that it will be very difficult for them. The winter is going to be a very challenging one. We can't promise to protect every job or every business. We can promise to offer hope and opportunity to those individuals who want to or will need to look for new jobs and opportunities. That's why the Chancellor is also investing more money in training, in DWP for work coaches, in apprenticeships, why the Prime Minister has now made his lifetime skills guarantee that enables people of all ages to access good quality technical education. And for young people who are being particularly hard hit, we're also, of course, launching the Kickstart programme, which is going to support hundreds of thousands of people, I hope, across the country to get that first job and get going again, despite the economic circumstances we find ourselves in.
You've spoken a lot about working with local leaders. In the Sunday Times today, it's saying that mayors will be given more control over test and trace in their local areas, that local volunteers will be able to knock on people's doors and tell them that they need to self-isolate. Is that correct?
Yeah, we want to work very closely with the local mayors and with the councils. We have been since the start of the pandemic. I certainly, as local government secretary, have been speaking to them almost every week. We're going to be ensuring that the national testing infrastructure, which has now increased enormously from 2,000 tests a day back in March to 310,000 most recently, and is continuing to rise, works in harmony with what's happening locally, because local councils and local communities are very good at contact tracing, understandably, because they know their communities. They can mobilise council officers, particularly for harder to reach communities. We've seen that in a number of places recently, particularly Leicester, where they did a great job. And so we're going to be helping the local councils to complement the national tracing infrastructure and also to have a greater say in track and trace as well.
Talking about test and trace, we currently spend more on test and trace than we do on nurseries and universities, but the latest stats show that the system is still only contacting 69% of people identified. I mean, is this strategy really working?
Well, as I say, it has moved forward enormously over the course of the summer, from a very low base back in March now to where we are with 310,000 tests a day. We've contacted, I think, over 700,000 people and helped them to self-isolate, protect themselves and others from the virus. So it is a constantly evolving and improving infrastructure. What we're doing now, as I say, is also bringing in the local level as well, so we can use all the resources of local councils effectively, as well as other resources. We've offered, for example, the armed forces to communities like Merseyside and Greater Manchester, and they can play a role in doing this. Our testing infrastructure is improving, but it does compare favourably with other countries. We're now testing about the same, if not more, than most other developed countries. We're bringing more people into the system. We're opening up new labs all the time, and of course we'll keep on ramping up that infrastructure over the course of the autumn and the winter.
It's difficult to kind of escape the view that as infections continue to rise, as people like Jonathan Van Tam said, that we're at a tipping point, that the system is effectively being overwhelmed. The government strategy has been what Boris Johnson termed whack-a-mole, to target with these local lockdowns areas where the virus is flaring up. But with so many people, tens of millions of people under these local lockdowns, it's hard to see that they're local anymore. I mean, are the moles now winning?
Well, although the number of cases rising rapidly across the country, there are still huge variations. If you go to Norfolk, I think the latest statistics showed that the number of cases is around 19. If you go to Manchester, it's well over 500. So it is right that we pursue a localised approach. That must be the way forward, because none of us want to see a return to blanket national measures. That would be the alternative, and that's not one that we want to contemplate.
It doesn't feel that localised when 1 in 3 of us are under national lockdown, though, does it?
Well, as I say, there isn't an alternative to doing that, because you don't want to see blanket measures across the country. We want to stick to the simple rules elsewhere, like washing your hands, wearing a mask, staying apart, and the rule of 6, and have more localised, targeted measures in the places that really need them. What we're doing now is going further and offering local communities, their local leadership, the opportunity to come forward further with further measures that they think will be particularly effective in those places. And that's the kind of conversations we've been having over the course of this weekend.
OK, now, if you look at the places that have seen these big increases in the virus, an awful lot of them are places where there are 2 universities, big student populations, thinking of places like Nottingham, Liverpool, Manchester. When we look back on the handling of the crisis, with hindsight, was it a big mistake to allow university students to return?
No, the Prime Minister chose to prioritise education and employment wherever we can. I think that was the right choice. These are difficult judgments, but it's a balanced judgment that it was right to help young people to get back into face-to-face, full-time education wherever possible. The return of schools was the right thing to do. 99% of schools are open. And I think getting young people back to university was also the right decision. Universities have put in place measures, whether that's trying to shield campuses where possible, using bubbles, substituting face-to-face education where they have to, with remote learning. So they have used the measures that are available to them. But there are no easy choices here, and we made a balanced judgment that it was right to get people back into education rather than allowing the life chances and opportunities of young people to be put on hold any longer.
And just finally, after the interview, I'm going to show a film that I made this week, going to Colchester United Football Club, League Two club, like many, really struggling to stay afloat without the money they get from live fans going there. Why is it safe for people to go to the pub, go to the cinema, but not at socially distanced outside football games?
Well, these are difficult choices, and there are trade-offs with each decision that we make. But the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, has been working extremely closely with the Football League and the Premiership to work through the way in which we can safely get fans back to watching sport. We would all love to see that, and if we can, we will do. But we've got to make difficult choices at the moment, and we've chosen to prioritise education and employment and things like that. So we'll keep on making those difficult decisions as far as we can, but the Culture Secretary is working very closely with the sports sector.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thank you very much for being on the programme today. Thank you.